Hello and welcome to the last edition for this season of Circle Time, the Early Years podcast. My name's Glenn Denny. Now, as a practitioner and a manager in an early years setting, I've never really stopped to think about the impact that a right-hand dominated world has on our children and young people that are actually left-handed. Well, my guest on this week's podcast has a really good experience of this with his own son who was looking for left-handed scissors. And this is what started their business 30 years ago. Welcome to the podcast, Mark Stewart.
Thank you very much, Glenn. Good to be here.
Brilliant. Yeah, so this is what started for you. Now, the one thing I'm going to check is, are you right-handed or are you left-handed?
I'm right-handed, as is my wife, who, by the by, is an ex-teacher. Mm-hmm. My eldest son is right-handed, but the youngest, Robert, is completely left-sided. So he's left eye dominant, left hand dominant, left foot dominant. Interestingly, there's nobody on my side at all who was left-handed, but my father-in-law was left-handed, but he was of the generation where he was forced to write right-handed as a child.
Yeah.
Not clever, really.
No.
But there you go.
No, it was definitely a thing, wasn't it? That, yeah, if you couldn't, you had to write a certain way. You had to write with your right hand, and that was it. I know my father's generation as well is exactly the same, and it's like you still, like, nowadays you can't think, did that actually sort of happen?
Sadly, it did, and up to a few years ago, we had the odd person coming into our shop when we had a bricks and mortar one, saying, you know, they knew of people who'd been still forced to write right-handed. But yeah, when Robert came along, we had a bit of a shock. Let's put it that way, because, for example, we'd sit him in the high chair, put a spoon as far right as you want. He'd put it straight to his left. Mm-hmm. He when he tried to kick a ball, he could not kick it with his right foot. He'd fall flat in his bottom. You know, so and my wife and I thought, gosh, what do we do now? Because there was nothing really in our knowledge bank about how to help left-handed children. Mm-hmm. And my wife, when she did her teacher training, had nothing about helping left-handed children either. So circumstances came that we started the shop, and we were very fortunate in a way that we had a member of parliament called Peter Luff. Now, Peter Luff is left-handed. Mm-hmm. And even better, he writes with a sort of hook style of writing that you sometimes see left-handers write with.
Yeah.
So we could have had a right-handed MP, a left-handed MP with a good technique, but actually to have a left-handed MP with a poor technique was really helpful. Mm-hmm. Because he really understood the issues, and he tabled some parliamentary questions and had a half-hour adjournment debate in the House of Commons about it. So we were very fortunate, and then I was looking for a new job at the time. And when Robert was about 4, we opened the shop, and as you said, it was looking for a pair of left-handed scissors for him that started us off. But I have to say, although it was a struggle in the first year or so, we had a lady came in, I think about the first week, and she said, "You don't know how you've changed my life." And I thought, wow, worth opening just to hear that. And mm-hmm. And over the months and years, we had a lot of children, particularly coming in with handwriting difficulties. And we sort of thought, well, you know, is there a way we can help sort this out? And say it was not part of teacher training, so we thought we'd do some investigation. And one week, it was about 5 years later, maybe something like that. Mm-hmm. There was a good book on handwriting for youngsters by Ladybird. It had a little bit about the actual technique, but really wasn't that good. And the guy who became our publisher, he was in our shop, and we had a young lad, and his mum came in, and the lad looked definitely unhappy at being there. And because he was obviously being dragged in, and anyway, to cut a long story short, I sorted out his handwriting technique, and he almost bounced out the shop in happiness. And the publisher saw this, and I said, you know, we've got this this Ladybird book, it's really not very good. So the publisher thought, okay, we'll do three. Sorry, three books. And so we did. And it's been an amazing journey, which which still continues, thankfully. So yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, like I say, I mean, I've been 27 years in early years, and for me, it's oh well, as long as I've got a left-handed pair of scissors lurking around somewhere, that'll do. That, but actually, the way you're describing it, there is a lot more to it. There's a lot more complex need. It's not just a matter of offering them a pair of left-handed scissors. It's like you're saying about the MP there with the kind of the claw hand. It's like I've seen more of that now. And actually, have I stopped to think about that enough? Am I providing enough for the children in my setting that are left-handed?
Yeah, interestingly, the first week that Robert was at school, he was given a pair of right-handed scissors to use, and at the end of the day, every other child had got their picture on the wall, and Robert, he hadn't even cut it out.
Mm-hmm.
And it really isn't good enough, because the child can end up thinking not what's wrong with the scissors, but what's wrong with me,
Mm-hmm.
and the self-esteem just goes wallop.
Yeah.
There are certainly over the years, people have said, "Oh, the scissors are ambidextrous. There aren't left-handed scissors. You know, you can use them in both hands."
Mm-hmm.
And yes, you may be able to physically use them in both hands, but the blade is one way or the other.
Yeah.
If you, as a right hander, if any of the listeners don't fully appreciate it, if you get a right-handed pair of scissors and hold them in your right hand, if you're going to follow a line, you'd look down the inside edge to follow that line. If you then put the same scissors in the left hand, the cutting edge is now on the outside of the scissors. So an awful lot of left-handers, if they're using right-handed scissors in their left hand, have to turn the scissors away from the vertical and have to turn the head so they're looking on the outside to follow the line. You know, and all these things, yes, I mean, they're potentially very simple to sort out. But if you've got a young child, and they're just learning all sorts of different things, but these things are in daily use in nurseries and primary schools,
Mm-hmm.
it really doesn't give them the start that they deserve. And I find it really very frustrating, because none of this is rocket science. You know, I'm just a simple right-handed man. I haven't done any teacher training, anything like that. But once you understand it, you can make such a difference. You know, where you sit, we're talking about the classroom, where you sit a child in the class, so they're not knocking elbows with a right-hander.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't take much thought, doesn't cost a penny, but you're actually affecting both of those children. So, and you know, just a little bit of observation, a bit of thought,
Mm-hmm.
and more importantly, action is the real key to all of this.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been campaigning for nigh on 30 years to try and get it as part of teacher training. And in the past, we produced a training video in 1999, which was great. But the problem was, and the teacher training agency sent it out to all the teacher training colleges in England. So I thought, yeah, we're really getting somewhere. But they didn't have to use it. And therefore, A, it didn't help them, but worst of all, it didn't help the children they were going to be
Mm-hmm.
teaching. So there's still room for improvement and a bit more proactive um, guidance and actually action in these settings, because, as I say, it can make such a difference.
It really can. I mean, thinking there as well, like when we're doing child assessments and things, there is parts on a lot of the assessments that say they're looking at hand dominance and you're right-handed or left-handed, but then it doesn't tell you what to do with it afterwards, does it?
No, interestingly, we after we wrote the left-hand writing skills books, we produced one called "So You Think They're Left-Handed?" question mark, and
Mm-hmm.
I wanted that question mark in because you don't always know, you can't always tell whether the child is right or left-handed. Some health visitors will say you can't tell until the child is 3. I would dispute that, certainly from the evidence of my son.
Mm-hmm.
But we used to do sort of laterality questions, which are rather fun, and we've got them in our new training video. And I do them when I do in-house training. And in fact, if you want to try one now, we'll try a couple. I don't know how to work as a podcast, but fold your arms in front of you. Which arm is on the top?
My right.
You're right. Okay.
Uh,
And you are right or left-handed, would
I'm
you say?
right-handed. I'm
You're
right.
right-handed. Well, I would say I'm right-handed, but it's my left arm that's on the top.
Oh.
So if you join your hands together, join your fingers together, which thumb is on the top?
My right.
You're right. Okay, maybe mine's my left, so maybe I'm more left than right. But it's interesting that there is a sort of scale, and over the years when I've done these at various schools and whatever, you've had the odd person who's been at the very end and ticked all the left-handed boxes, and those who've ticked all the right-handed boxes. And in the So You Think They're Left-Handed book, what we've done is we've done half a dozen very simple basic activities that the child can do with the parent observing and note down which hand, eye, foot they use. There is, for example, one about using a kaleidoscope, for example, and to see which eye dominant they are. And usually you put it to your dominant eye. And I had this little lad come in, and I said, "Have a look through that, just and pretend to be a pirate, you know." So he went there and he went slap bang between his eyes. So he obviously hadn't quite decided which eye dominant he was, but you know, that is a book that as parents, Heather and I would have been really pleased to have had, because as right-handers, as we've said, you don't really think about it, you don't particularly have any understanding. But it was actually quite helpful being right-handed, because we could look objectively and say, okay, well, Robert's struggling with this. Why is he struggling with this? Tying shoelaces, for example. So we thought, okay, well, we'll use Velcro to begin with, because that's really helpful. That solves a lot of problems. But then we thought, okay, he's going to have to tie a tie, and we'd like him really to tie shoelaces. So we sat opposite, and you can do this with a lot of crafts, is sit a right-hander opposite and doing a sort of mirror image.
Yes.
Or find a friendly left-hander who will help. But with the shoelaces, for example, you say take one lace in your left hand, take one lace in your right hand, put the right hand over the left hand, and you break it down into all those different parts and go through it like that. But there are a lot of simple things, like with the knife and fork, and that's a further interesting activity. Or let's say with a spoon on its own, we put it on the left hand side, because we knew that Robert was going to use his left hand to eat with. With a mug for his drink, we'd put that on the left hand side. We'd sit him on the end of the table so he wouldn't be knocking elbows with anybody else. So these are very simple things you can do that don't cost a penny, but actually can make a real difference to the child and give them a feeling of being able to do things naturally, rather than having to cross over and pick up things and do all things weird way around, you know.
It's that thing as well about being included, that they're not feeling that they're always in the way. You know, like you say, if they're sitting on the wrong side of somebody who's like right-handed, then the clashing elbows and bumping arms and all, then they're constantly feeling like they're in the way and they're not valued because they have a slight difference to one of their peers, and that has a terrible effect on their self-esteem, doesn't it?
It certainly can do. But having said that, it can be helpful to be different. And I'll tell you why. Because Robert, for example, was very well coordinated and very left foot dominant. And his football team really appreciated him. His school team, because he would go out and confuse the opposition. He'd be running down the left wing and doing great guns with his left foot. So that's, you know, it's not all negative, but yes, I mean, you do need to appreciate that. And I think this is where people teachers who work in early years settings, just need to be a little bit more proactive in how they do things. Okay, so I got to think of the left-handers. So the left-handers, these are your scissors, those are the right-handed ones. Let's check where they're sitting in class, they're not knocking elbows. And then we can go on to handwriting and that sort of thing, and we need a slightly different technique for that. So yeah, there are certainly things that you can do. But going back to the knife and fork, it's one of those other interesting laterality tests. Because it's a double-handed activity. And I think if you're going to try and find out whether the child is right or left-handed, you want to disregard double-handed activities.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about it, as a right-handed child, I would put the food to my mouth with my dominant hand.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my right hand. I'm then told with a knife and fork, no, you're not going to do that. You got to put the fork in your left hand and do the cutting with the right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's deemed to be eating right-handed, but actually you're putting the food to your mouth with your left hand, or trying to.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you bat at cricket, another double-handed one, you can bat right-handed without actually using your right hand if you have to, because actually it's the left arm that does the main work and controlling.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to give these activities a little bit of thought, and say stick with single-handed activities to sort of confirm dominance.
Yeah, definitely. Like I say, in the sort of the assessments, the childhood assessments and things that you get, it's just that one box that you've got to fill in. But actually, are they ready to actually declare their dominance, if you like, that, yes, this is the hand I'm going to use? It's one of those tricky things. It's like, do you just leave it for a while, let them really settle into it, and then come back to it?
I think you really need to observe well what the child is doing with what hand. Robert, for example, at one point he wrote his name from right to left,
Mm-hmm.
and we thought, oh gosh, okay. And he struggled with his reading, because, and we could tell that, we'd read to him at bedtime and or other times, and once we'd read a book, when we went back to it, you could tell that he was furiously trying to remember what was written, not actually reading it.
Mm-hmm.
And we reckon that it was because his eyes were scanning right to left.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which from his perspective was normal. But in our society, obviously, we read left to right, we write left to right, we tell the time left to right.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, we had a left-handed clock in the shop, and I thought that was a gimmick. It's not. Some left-handers really do find it a lot easier to see it go anti-clockwise. But what we did with Robert was we highlighted the margin where he was going to start writing. And with reading, we'd use the finger and get him to use his finger. So we both went from left to right, and fairly quickly he got used to the fact that text went from left to right. But things like that can make them feel as though they're standing out and different.
Mm-hmm.
He fairly soon got the hang of reading, and there was no issue at all. And interestingly, with art as well, age 3 or 4, he did a drawing that had perspective in it. And quite frankly, I struggle to draw matchstick men.
Yeah.
So left-handers are quite often more artistic, creative, not necessarily across the board, but it was interesting when I had left-handers come into our shop and I asked them the sort of things they did. They were very often designers, engineers, chefs, and it very often fitted in with that sort of artistic, creative side of things. But yeah, there's good observation will take the teacher a long way, I think.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting actually, you were saying there about the clock. I never even thought about that, actually. That was just one little thing there. I mean, yeah, I could definitely see about the, having to switch things around a bit. Like we read left to right and we write left to right. But actually it's really difficult. I mean, I'm gonna ask a really daft question now, but when a left-handed person writes for the first, do they actually write right to left? Or,
They can do, but they're not necessarily.
mhm.
Not
Okay.
necessarily. And writing is quite a major area of
Mhm.
potential difficulty.
Yeah.
I have seen the most beautiful handwriting from a left-hander, and sadly, I've seen an awful lot of really poor grips
Mhm.
and really poor handwriting. And I just wish I'd kept numbers of the children we've helped over the years, because I'm sure it's into thousands. And one of the issues, particularly if you're talking about young children, is that in the early years, children use pencil,
Mhm.
and letter formation can often be okay. And everybody says, great, that looks fine, leave it, let them carry on. What they don't do, though, is to look at how it's produced, so the actual technique. And some people will say, oh, they just do the opposite the right-hander, don't they? No, they don't. No, they don't. You need to, as right-handers, to a certain degree, we can get away with a poor technique because we're going away from the writing all the time. The left-hander comes from behind it. So unless they adapt the technique, can end up smudging it. Their hand covers over the writing. They have problems copying. Finger spacing can be difficult. And all the components of handwriting are absolutely critical for the left-hander. So how you hold the pen or pencil, where you have it in the hand, how you have the paper, and how you have the wrist is all absolutely critical. And you get one of those components out of place, and you're still going to be end up going over what you're writing and smudging and making a mess of it. And very often the children we had in our shop were sort of 9, 8, 9, 10, just starting to use a pen, and suddenly their handwriting is letting them down. Nobody knows how to help them. Self-esteem goes down, marks goes down, and it all goes to pot. And if good habits can be embedded early, potentially you're going to save an awful lot of time and effort and remedial work later on. So whilst the child may not understand entirely the whys and wherefores, any good habits you can encourage will help. I have to say, from my experience, it wasn't until Robert was probably about 7 or 8 that he could really understand what he was meant to do and put it into writing. But what you can do, which doesn't always work, but it has, I found it to be helpful, is to a certain degree you cause the problem to solve it. So, for example, if you're using a whiteboard or colouring in at home, doing anything like that, or painting, and the left-handed child is drawing away, colouring away, whatever, and suddenly they take their hand off and all the hand is covered and it's all messy and the writing's messy, that's a really good time to pick up on it and say, oh, look, we're getting messy hands. That's not very nice, is it? If we do it this way, then your hand's going underneath it and you can see what you're doing. You're not going to make a mess. And that Christmas card you're going to do for Granny and Grandpa isn't going to be the mess it usually is.
Yeah.
It's going to be nice and neat, and you're going to get the marks you deserve. Yeah. So it's these sort of things that are very simple to impart, really, but are absolutely critical for the child's academic progress, really, I would say.
No, that's brilliant. Now, the other thing as well, you kind of touched on it very briefly earlier. You've actually produced a new downloadable interactive training video as well, haven't you? Which I think, if I'm right, that's on the My CPD group website, isn't it?
It is, yes. Well, we had a bricks and mortar shop, as I said previously, and we had a toy shop within it, and our left-handed section. And for various reasons, we decided to close down the toy shop. In fact, it was just at the start of COVID, which, yeah, there you go. But before that, we thought, well, things aren't going quite as well as we could do, but we wanted to carry on doing our left-handed bits. So we got that changed to home. We've got the website, etc. And my wife said, you're not going to be able to carry on doing all these training sessions in person, as you grow older and whatever. And so I thought about our training video that we produced in 1999, but that was in VHS, which is obviously not appropriate nowadays. So I thought, well, yeah, let's see if we can jazz it up a bit and make it a bit more interesting. And if we make it downloadable, then people in other countries can see it. I don't have to go out in person every time, although I prefer doing it because it's much better getting that person-to-person relationship, as it were. But we had a couple of people who, one did work for the BBC doing the filming, and the other has done voiceovers and done local radio as well. And so they produce this downloadable interactive video, which we're really pleased with. It's interactive in that there are various sections. So we start off with an introduction. and how or why you become left-handed, and then we do the laterality test, and we go on to scissors. But you can stop it. In fact, we suggest that somebody looks through it first, so they can decide when they want to stop it, because there are activities, practical activities you can do, and you might want to stop at a section and say, okay, well, let's have a chat about this, or how did you find it, etc., etc. So, and what we've done with that, we've also added a teacher's checklist to it. There's a discount code, so you can get discount on resources.
Mm-hmm.
You can get CPD certificates, personalized. So all trying to help and make life easier for the teachers, and then on to the children. What we also suggest, there are simple things. There are bits about rulers and pencil sharpeners, left-handed ones you can get, but also encouraging settings to have a specific teacher set aside who can help those left-handed children, which I think can be really helpful. Yeah.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, for me, like I say, I mean, I started off, I was of the kind of, the opinion that as long as we've got a pair of left-handed scissors, we're fine. But actually, there's more to it. And I think, yeah, like you say, more people need to do this, and kind of the interactive online platforms are, I mean, COVID has really brought them forward, and it's very much in your face, which is, on one side, it's good because you can interact at any time, day or night. Whereas, but the downside is that, like you say, is that you're losing that personal touch where you can, people can ask those questions, or you can help with technique or something like that. So it's missing that element, but it is really good that it reaches a wider audience as well.
Definitely. I mean, that's one of the things we wanted to do. It's also for parents as well. They can use it, but reaching the wider audience is our goal. Yeah, it's actually, we've sold a couple in Australia, which blows my mind a little bit, because there's a guy out there who's got our books, and yeah, so he's sold a couple, but it's a matter of getting out there, and once it's out there, hopefully it'll go like ripples, that people will understand it, and one would like to think, not only in the academic life but in society generally, there might be a bit more understanding and a bit of more equality or equity in society's attitudes towards left-handers, because I know in some countries they're still viewed less than positively, let's put it that way. So yeah, there is certainly a broader reach, which has been our aim from the start, really.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, certainly, even just talking to you right now, that there's so many things that I didn't think about. Like, I mentioned like the clock, and you just mentioned about, pencil sharpness, and like I'd never considered that. Actually, yes, if you do that, I mean, I have to admit that whilst we were talking, I picked up my scissors and some paper, and I'm actually going to try this just now. Like, yes, I know I can cut fine with a pair of scissors in my right hand. Let me just do this now.
If you draw a line and try and copy it along the line.
Right, I've now got my scissors
along the line.
In my left hand.
Yeah.
I'm going to cut along the line.
You will probably find, or possibly find, that if they're a sharp pair of scissors, they may cut. But unless you look on the correct side of the scissors, you're going to miss the line by the width of the blade.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly it. I've cut into it, but even though you can see I've started it, but then I've gone along and it's actually missing the line. Yeah.
Yeah. And if you try cutting out material with the wrong pair of scissors in the wrong hand, it just folds rather than cuts. It's an absolute nightmare.
I think as well with children's safety scissors, particularly the ones that we have in nursery and things like that, I think that makes it worse. I mean, I have literally done that, gone, I need a pair of scissors, picked up the first pair, and it's like, they're left-handed. Okay. Right. And then trying to cut them right, it's impossible. It's impossible.
Yes.
For somebody.
Yeah, that's right. And if you imagine that you're struggling with that, multiply that by 2 or 3 times for the aggravation that the child is having, and they're not going to understand, oh, well, if I look on the outside of the scissors, then I can see the line, and maybe if I force the blades together, that will help make them cut. They won't have that knowledge and understanding. And Oh, yeah. Anyway, I get grumpy about these things.
Well, Mark, it has been absolutely brilliant to talk to you. You've given me so much to think about. It's brilliant. It's an area of my own personal development that I've never really considered. But no, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast. It was an absolute pleasure.
Thank you very much, Glenn. Much appreciated.
Mark Stewart, thank you.